Well, we can't address this subject without talking about Job. So let's talk about when God seems silent. And Job is probably the prime candidate for that. He, through all his struggles, all his trials, all his suffering, was never told why. Why was this happening to him? And he asked why, and God had no problem with that. You know, the Bible never tells you you can't ask why. Nothing wrong with that. But God won't always give you the why. Not now, at least. And with Job, God never told him why. He never told him about Satan's challenge that we read about at the very beginning of the book. Job didn't have the book to read. Part of Job's victory, part of what made his faith so great, was the fact that he endured without knowing. You know, it's always easier to endure when you know why. It's easier to handle if there's a purpose or a goal to it all. When it's meaningless, that's hard. But when it seems meaningless, when we don't see a purpose for things in our lives, we begin to feel our lives have no purpose. But what are we told in Jeremiah 29:11? I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans for welfare, plans for your benefit, plans for your goodness, and not for evil, not for bad things, not for calamity, but to give you a future and a hope. That's purpose. God has a purpose for you. And in fact, the following two verses, what does it say? Then you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will hear you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. That's surrender. There's purpose, and we find it when we surrender. Habakkuk turned around and waited gleefully for God's power to come once he understood the purpose, once he surrendered his own ideas and accepted God's. Now, this wasn't the case for Job, which is what made his faith so great. Satan's whole premise was that Job would turn against God if things weren't easy for him. If Job had known why and what blessings he would receive and how famous he would be for all time, Satan would have accused God of showing favoritism, helping him out, which again was Satan's whole challenge. Not knowing why is part of the suffering and part of the reason for the suffering and part of what makes the faith great. But God's silence does not mean his absence. In the end, God visits Job and blesses him with twice as much as before. It's kind of like Job got a double portion of inheritance, just like the firstborns would at the time. That was their inheritance, a double portion. We have been adopted as God's sons and daughters. Christ has given us his inheritance as the firstborn. We are his inheritance. Think about that. We are what Christ is inheriting. When you're suffering, oh, he cares. Believe me, he cares. We can always know that God cares. Christ said to Thomas that blessed are those who will believe in him, trust in him, even without seeing all the miracles and the touching and actually physically being with Jesus. It was their faith. The cross shows us that God cares. God would not invest himself personally if he didn't care. God became man so he can relate to us. He has skin in the game, so to speak. I guess kind of literally. It's personal to him because we are his inheritance, purchased by his own blood. It's all about faith and the faithfulness of God. Do we believe? Do we trust him? Even if we don't understand, that's the challenge. Satan puts that challenge. He still does. You don't have to be Job. You're made in God's image. That's all it takes. Over and over, God reminds his people that there are things going on that they don't see or understand. But again, it doesn't mean God's not active. It doesn't mean God doesn't care. And in the end, we will see just how much he cares. And we will have a greater victory if we keep that faith where it belongs, in Christ. He does care.